I'm sitting here with a very special guest, the one and only Phil Jeremiah the Fourth. I've seen Phil Jeremiah in action many times. He comes to the Netherlands once a year, and he's by far the most unorthodox coach that I know of. I've never seen a coach sing and use his voice and become sub-personas of the coachee, use that much of humor and craziness and still be very wise and effective. So I'm really stoked. You say when you're very excited.
Yes, yes,
Yes,
stoking the furnace up. Yeah.
yeah. That I have you as a guest today. So very welcome, Phil.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Yeah, and the other day I was trying to work out. I've been coming across to the Netherlands. It must be going on 24 years. I've been coming across, doing the provocative coaching sessions in Nijmegen, and the only 2 years I couldn't make it. Obviously, 1 year because of the pandemic.
Hmm.
So we did a Zoom, an all-day Zoom session, which was
I was there.
fascinating.
I
And
remember.
and and the other one was when I broke my neck. So so I was in a surgical collar for nearly 12 months. But I did offer. I say, well, the crew could come over and see me, and I'll sit there in the wheelchair and still provoke gently, of course. So yeah, so I just love coming across to the Netherlands, and I think the Dutch people are absolutely fantastic, and designed to provoke as well. They're
Wow.
really good at it, really good. Yeah.
Thanks. And so next year is going to be some kind of a jubilee. It's a special year,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
25th time.
yeah. 20. Yeah, well, I'll get a medal, and as was announced this year, I'm the sort of the only fellow at the institute. Of course, there's
Yeah.
no other fellow, and as far as I know, there's no other fellows on the planet that can do provocative coaching. So I'm unique in that sense. You know,
In many
a
senses.
fellow, a
Yeah,
fellow of the institute. It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? I'm a
it does.
fellow of the
It
institute. Yeah.
does. It does.
Yes.
Hey, let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
A, a lot of people in Holland know about provocative coaching or therapy, but not everyone. Can you
Yeah.
just shortly tell a little bit about it? What is it? Why is it so interesting?
Yeah, well, obviously, the father of provocative therapy, as it was known then, was Professor Frank Farrelly, and of course his early work was very interesting because he was going to train as a priest, but then he ended up working with Carl Rogers, client centered. But then he probably decided that the client-centered stuff wasn't really for him, so he decided to break off and started provoking clients in a sort of playful way, with his hand on his heart and his twinkle in his eye, and started almost like giving them, reverse psychology methodology in the early years, where somebody would say, well, I'm no good, I'm worthless, and you go, yeah, you probably are, you're the biggest bag of shit I've ever met, sort of thing. And of course people then would defend themselves, like, no, I'm not that bad, I'm really trying to make a difference in my life. So and he said that was one of the things that he noticed. People started to defend themselves more realistically in terms of what was going on in the real world as well. So as opposed to some nice, neat sessions in the therapist's office, but then you've still got to go out to the real world and perform and have skin in the game. So that was his early developmental style. Then Frank, first met Frank. It must have been about, I don't know, about 26 years ago, when he came over, because I'd always used humor in my work, but I felt I needed a bit more structure in terms of how I was going to deliver this. So I spent a lot of time with Frank. He came to stay with me when I lived in Stratford upon Avon. So every time he would come across to do workshops, he'd come and stay. So I had a lot of opportunity to pick his brains and just be out and about with him really, and sort of learning through osmosis and soaking up his patterns and asking him a lot of questions
Can I
as well.
interrupt you right there?
Yes,
Because you
yeah.
must have had some interesting experiences with him while he was staying with you. Is there something you could
Oh
share?
God, yeah, he was fantastic. Like he would teach me how to warm the coffee pot before I made the coffee. So it was like an education. And then I always remember him saying, he said, "Get me some tissues," because he was always like blowing his nose, whether he had hay fever or something. I'm not sure. And I bought some tissues, and he said, "These are not 3-ply. I want 3-ply tissues. 3 layers." And I thought, my God, this is interesting. So. And then I started. I did notice there was a lot of people around Frank that treated him like a bit of a guru. And he said, "I don't want to be treated like a guru," but I think people just naturally fell into that. He was the founder, the father of provocative therapy, um, but I didn't treat him like a guru, and I would provoke him. So I would. I remember I picked him up from Heathrow Airport in London. He flew in from the States, and I was going to drive him up to the Midlands. And I saw him there in the arrivals. And first thing he said, I need to go for a pee. Where's that? So I pointed, and he sort of slapped my hand and he said, "Don't point, it's rude." You know, I said, "Hey, I have to point because you're an old git and you won't know where the toilets are." So straight away it started that there was
Right.
a lot of banter and gentle provocation going on.
Yeah.
So I did that a lot with him, really. I used to mess around and play around, and then he'd threaten to sort of take a swing at me, because he was a boxer when he was younger. I think he
Oh,
he even got up to Golden Glove standard in the States, So, but I said, "You're too slow for me. Yeah, you can't keep up with me, Frank. You can't catch me." So there's a lot of teasing going on there as
yeah.
well,
I
which
love
was
that,
good.
and that's already quite interesting because when you tease someone, then there's an undercurrent of "I respect you," right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
vice versa.
yeah,
Sometimes
yeah,
when you handle someone with satin gloves,
yeah.
then the undercurrent is you are very fragile, and I have to be careful with you, right?
That's right, and that's one of the things I say when I'm working with people. I said, "I'm not going to wrap you in cotton wool,
Mm.
because I think that's an insult to you as a human being." And sometimes if we want to, if you want to learn how to box, then you're going to have to spar and you're going to have to take a few knocks, but then
Yes.
hopefully you will get stronger. And I remember when I was a boy in Wales, and I started out working in the steelworks, so it was nothing to do with therapy or hospitals that I later went on to work in. And there was a lot of teasing would go on in the steelworks. And I was a young boy of 16 in this big steelworks, the man's world as it was, because, and I'm saying that not to be, stereotypical in any way, because there wasn't any women working in there.
Mm.
Apart from a bit later on, because I was there a couple of years, but there was teasing. But then some of the older men would step in and then say, "That's enough." They would
Mm.
stop when the teasing got too much.
Yes.
There's a fine line. They would say, "Hey, that's enough now,"
Yeah.
and then you knew you had to stop.
Yeah.
Otherwise you'd probably get a clip across the head. It
Wonderful.
would get physical,
Yeah.
if you didn't stop.
Yeah. So there was
And I think, yeah,
a space where you could play around
yeah,
and tease
yeah,
each other, but when it got too far, then there
that's
was
right.
some kind of
Yeah,
safe
yeah.
barriers, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There
Wonderful.
were boundaries. There were
Boundaries.
boundaries, and
Yes.
and I think that allows people to grow,
Mm.
and get strong when there's good boundaries in place.
Mm.
Hence, my development then of using this metaphorical bubble, which
Mhm.
I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit more detail. That was almost like the foundation of me noticing that there had to be boundaries with this stuff. And
Yeah.
you respected other people. There was teasing, but then there was a time to stop as well.
Yeah.
You know.
Wonderful. So tell us about the bubble because indeed you are famous of that.
Yeah, well, it was something. something that, again, on the back of, working with Frank and doing workshops with him, I thought I need to define this more clearly for people. So if somebody's coming to see me because I worked for nearly 35 years in adult psychiatry, so I was approved under the Mental Health Act in the UK. So that meant I used to go out and assess people under the Mental Health Act and sometimes section people under the Mental Health Act. So I thought I had to be able to shift my perspective if I was doing any kind of therapeutic work with people. So, so they saw me different in terms of, right, we're sitting in this metaphorical bubble of possibility, and then explaining anything goes in the bubble. I'm not going to wrap you in cotton wool. I'm going to do anything and say anything. I'm going to be outrageous. I might sing. I might change my voice because I want to break up the patterns. I want to help you break up your patterns as well that are running, in our brains. So it was like we sometimes as well in the early days. I'd even change chairs to define the space in the office. This is the bubble. It is now switched on. We're going to do 20 minutes and we're going to go for it. And then afterwards, we'll switch the bubble off and we'll have a discussion. And again, that links in with my model of percussion, concussion, and discussion, which we will probably go into in a bit more detail as well. So I found the bubble very useful because then when the bubble was turned off, I could go back to doing other stuff.
Mm.
And I found, and a lot of people that I trained over the years, sometimes they were physicians, they were doctors, they couldn't just start acting crazy and provoking because to me, that's not the way to go about this.
Mm.
I think we do need to let people know what's coming. In fact, that can energize them further because they think, my God, what on earth is coming down the timeline then? Well, what's going to be happening when I say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, this might happen, that might happen. So it was useful for people, whether they were coaches or therapists, psychotherapists or doctors, to say, right, let's move over into this space and we'll do this. Do you want to have a look at doing this and do you want to, explore having a bubble session? So a lot of people found that useful to actually define the space and create boundaries, which I'd probably noticed many years before in the mists of time when I was working in the steelworks. There was boundaries. There was there was a structure there into the teasing, stop the teasing, step out of the teasing, and go about
Wonderful.
the. So yeah, so it works very well, because people recognize that as well.
I totally agree. And I find it also helps me as a coach to get myself in a more provocative mood.
Yes, yeah. You have to. It's like if people might say to me, "Well, why did you start singing in the session?" I say, "Well, if I'm singing in a session, my neural, I'm going down different neural pathways in the brain. That's a fact. If I'm just talking in the same monotone way, hello, my name's Phil. Hopefully we can do some counseling today, and I'll do my best to help you," then I'm going down the same narrow pathways.
Yes.
But if I start going, "What's it all about, Alfie? Is it just a game that we play?" Then straight away it's shocking for the client. What the hell's going on in this session? He's singing. Isn't he listening to my problems or issues? He's more interested in his own voice. And of course, when I'm doing that, I'm going to different departments in my brain. I'm getting a different rhythm going as well when I'm singing, whether I'm singing in key or not, it doesn't matter, but you're right, that's a good point because it allows me to go somewhere else to access maybe forgotten resources, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about the resources, I know that you're also trained in solution focused therapy or coaching.
Yeah. My background, I started out doing the Rogerian stuff when I first
Mm.
worked in psychiatric social work, doing the Rogerian stuff. Then, of course, came the CBT. So we were all trained in that. And then, and again, there was, if I look back down the timeline, NLP term, using NLP as well. Then, Milton H. Erickson. So I trained in Ericksonian hypnosis, and I liked some of the stuff that Erickson was doing because he was very provocative in his work as well. As we know, if you look at the teaching tales of Erickson, very
Mhm.
provocative chap, and also Viktor Frankl, using paradoxical intention and reverse psychology methodology, prescribing the symptom to the patient or client as well. So I over the years I've trained in and then stuff like EFT, EMDR, eye movement reprocessing, all that sort of stuff. So it's about designing the intervention to meet the person's needs. So if I think that somebody will benefit better from an NLP intervention with, say, a flying phobia, then I probably wouldn't use provocative coaching. Or sometimes then, if I'm sort of assessing the person's attributional style, I might use a provocation. I remember I worked with a nurse, and she was trained in CBT, NLP, and I thought this ain't going to work so well because why isn't she using this herself? And we
Yeah.
talked about that. So the stuff that she's trained in didn't particularly work for her. So I said, what about this provocation? Let's have a look at this. So we set up the bubble session, and I started running this movie of her, sitting on the plane where she starts to sweat. She might even wet herself and have an extreme fight flight reaction. And I said, people on the plane, want to enjoy the flight, their movies, their food. The last thing they want is you twitching and sweating and getting all jumpy and anxious next to them and calling for help. I said, they just want to enjoy, the flight is part of their holiday. I said, people like you should be put in crates, in with the luggage, like the animals, you could be sedated very heavily. And she went crazy. She said, I'm not going in some crate and all the rest of it. So that worked very well. And she got on the flight. And she said when she was on the flight, she was running that session. She was running the movie of the session that we had. How dare I suggest she should be packed away in the back with the animals because people want to enjoy, their holiday, really, sort of thing. So again, that was a little bit of flexibility, knowing full well the other stuff probably wouldn't have worked so well, but
Yeah.
that did. That was the shock, that she needed as well. And I've done that with provocative tasking, where I worked with another psychologist who had this lovely gig in Australia. It was a big deal for us. She was going to go out there and present her papers, but she had a flying phobia. So I did the provocation, and out of that, I said, "Do you like the works of William Shakespeare?" And she said, no, I couldn't stand Shakespeare, when I was at school. So I pulled out the complete works of William Shakespeare, which is a massive, heavy book, a huge thing. It would take up all your hand luggage for a start. It was that big, it was that heavy. And I said, this is what you do when you get on the plane at Heathrow, and you scale yourself 1 to 10. And if you think that you've gone over to 6, because that's what we negotiated, he said, I'm all right on about 4 or 5 in terms of my subjective scale. I said, but if you start to go to 6, you bring out the complete works of Shakespeare and you read all the way to Australia. And I think the first play was The Tempest. I said, that's very appropriate for you. You know, I said, again, people are enjoying themselves on the plane and having some food, having some drinks, watching some movies. And there's you, the nerd, sitting there reading this great, big, huge book. And that was it. And so I used that when that book went all around the world. It went with 5 or 6 people got that book, because then she brought it back to me and she said it was bizarre how it worked. And she said that provocation of being told to read the complete work, she said it just kept the lid on my anxiety. She said and she was a doctor of psychology, and she was still trying to work it out what the hell was going on in her brain, you know.
So how would you explain to people why do these strange, unexpected interventions work?
It Viktor Frankl obviously did a lot of work on this, where he would prescribe there's a lovely story where a junior doctor came to see him who was sweating profusely, and when he had to give a lecture. So again, Frankl said to him, well, how many pints are you sweating? He said about two, I think. Frankl said, not enough. Sweat at least 5 pints. Show people, how hard you work to deliver this lecture, and you're sweating profusely, and when you prescribe the symptom, it does work. In the past, when I've had anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, I've done it myself and it works. It really does work. And Frankl likened to it, saying it takes the wind out of the sails, you know, because people normally are trying to calm people down in that situation, and we know for a fact it won't work, because your amygdala is up and running. As far as your amygdala is concerned, you're on the savannah and you've got a lion chasing you. So calming down ain't going to work, because your frontal lobe has become disengaged anyway. You don't need your frontal lobe when you're being chased by a lion, basically,
No.
because you don't need to be discussing philosophy when there's a lion over there, that big creature showing its teeth, and you're having a debate about Nietzsche or something. It's not so it gets cut off in terms of the amygdala kicks in, and we go into fight, flight, freeze, and survival. But there's something weird happens when we prescribe it. We start to learn then to dampen down that limbic friction that's happening when we get emotionally dysregulated, when we feel threatened by anything. And as we know, the brain doesn't know the difference between what's real, what's imagined. So you can actually see the lion on the savannah, or you can be thinking about the lion on the savannah, and it'll still probably trigger off the association if you've had previous experience of being chased by lions. So it works very efficiently. And of course, the more you do it, the more you now are probably developing neuroplasticity. So you're developing new pathways to bypass that old original issue or problem that you have, and it works every time. When I've been on the verge of having panic, when I had post-traumatic stress many years ago, the first time I broke my neck, um, and I scaled myself, and I thought, I'm on 7, I'm going up here, and I thought, well, let's just do it. Let's just that. And straight away, something weird. There's like a switch happens. You still feel a little bit shaky, but you don't have the full blown panic. And if anybody's had panic, they know what it's like. It's pretty awful when you're having a full blown panic attack.
So how do you apply it to yourself? What do you say
Yeah,
to yourself?
you're just having that. You use what I call the mind coach technique, where you're talking to yourself in the third person. So you're, all
Mhm.
right, Phil, go up to 10. Go for the big panic. Let's just get it over. You can pee yourself, you can wet yourself, you can fill your pants full of your poo, extreme fight, flight. And then all of a sudden you start, thinking, all right, no, I ain't going to go up to 10. And I've done that with people. I might have mentioned the story to you before, but the young man on the tube in London, and he had to get round London, and obviously the quickest way, and the way that was better financially, was to get on the underground on the tube. And of course, when he got down there, he was a little bit claustrophobic. So again, I ran this extreme movie with him in the session, and I said, look, the best way to, because he said he felt enclosed with all these people, and if you get on the tube at the wrong time, it's packed, isn't it? You're like sardines in a tin, you know. And I said, what you need to do is go all the way with an extreme fight, flight, freeze mechanism. So you need to pee yourself for a start, and you can see the steam rising, and people will notice that straight away. That steam and that pool of urine at your feet. And then I said, you need to fill your pants. Just let it all. I said, the stench. I said, you will have space all around you. I said, you might even get a carriage to yourself, because people will back off. Do you know what I mean? They ain't going to come. And of course, he's laughing at that. And that got it. He has now broken the previous pattern, because we've infected those neural pathways with something new, something novel, There's the effect. I think I was talking about it in Nijmegen, the Hedwig von Restoff effect. So if you are going to create new effects in the brain, you've got to make the amplitude larger. So you've really got to go for it and create this extreme movie. You aren't going to mess around with this. You're the producer, you're the director, you're on the set, and just have this technicolor, movie that involves all the senses, the smells, the stench, the pee, the steam rising, and then all of a sudden they're more likely to recall that because of that amplitude effect. So when he got on the tube, he was smiling to himself. He's laughing. He's got some headphones on. He's listening, and then he's replaying the session, or certainly the big components of that session that we didn't think. And it worked, because this was another guy who had he'd had other therapies. He'd had CBT. He'd had counselling. He'd had EMDR and all this sort of stuff. He'd had medication. None of it worked. This one, it just smashed it immediately. It was an extreme, you want the person to have an extreme reaction, extreme shock, with care, of course, as well, because you really want them to get on that tube and do their job. And that sort of extreme movie, that's one of the patterns that I use when I'm working with people, works very efficiently. Very, because you warn people to say, right, do you really want this change? Because in this bubble session, it's coming. I'm coming to help you, but hell's coming with me. Whoa, yeah. I'm not so sure about this now. Say, well, you want the change, we can, the brain can do this. It's got the capability to reset, to reorganize, and reroute new neural pathways. That's a fact.
Wonderful.
And the more shocking, the better that works.
Yeah, yeah. And good that you said that you have to do it with care, because
Yeah.
I've been in sessions with you twice, I think.
Yeah.
And
you've survived.
I've survived.
Yeah.
It even helped me. But the warmth is, people can, I think they can see it now and feel it now if they watch this, but I can convince them that there's a lot of warmth and compassion when you work with people. And it's an interesting paradox, because verbally you say some pretty unexpected and sometimes tough things, but there's a lot of there's an undercurrent of warmth, love, almost, that's
you're dealing with with heavy stuff in a lot of situations. I work with people who've I think that I might have mentioned another case that I worked with, somebody that had to go before the court because a priest had been accused of abusing this chap and some of his friends, and this was years later. It got to court, and I said, and he was very worried about the court appearance, because probably the defense barrister would have a go, to dismantle and deconstruct, these accusations. So I got in the session and I said, I'm like this now. I'm like some QC barrister, the barrister from hell, who's going to really rip into you. And we did that in the session, and I was saying things like, my goodness, you've got the absolute audacity of accusing this man of the church of touching you during choir practice. Absolutely disgusting. It's absolutely, and the session went on like that. In the session, he was sweating. At one stage, I thought, I've got to be careful. He could keel over and have a heart attack, But after the session, he said, I really needed that. He went to court and he said, you know what, Phil? He said, I'm really glad that we did that full-on session. He said, because the defense barrister was like a pussycat compared to you. So I sort of aimed to cover all the possibilities, in terms of, I've been in court situations with clients in psychiatry, so I know the court system, and I felt comfortable, playing that extreme role, because that's what was needed. Because he wanted to go to court, but then his extreme anxiety was stopping him from doing it. But then that got him over the hurdle of doing it. Now, I don't know of anything else that could have done that. You know, I could have done some CBT with him, some clinical hypnosis, could have done some NLP, some EFT and EMDR, but I just thought that was so powerful. And that's because it was, you know, I was in that role of being that barrister from hell, you know, and he really needed that, you know, um, to build his resources as well, you know, before he got to the court as well.
You
So
were
so
like
there
a
is,
real
but
tough.
then in between that, going back to your question, sorry to
Mhm.
interrupt. Well,
No, it's
no, I'm
okay.
not sorry to interrupt. It's one of the patterns, isn't it, to interrupt, to break up the flow, isn't it? There's the congruence that comes in as well. So I switched in and going, hey, you doing all right here? Do you want to carry on with it? Yeah, yeah, let's carry on. So then
Mm.
I switched to being congruent in the session as well. And he knows that I'm doing it from a big open heart, I'm there for him. I've got his back. I want him to perform and succeed at doing this as well. You know, powerful stuff, really
Yeah,
powerful.
it is. And I also have the impression that there are situations where nothing works but this.
Yeah, yeah, I certainly think so. Those extreme examples, and again, where people. I had another guy who was he was another doctor of psychology, and he wanted to pass his driving test, but again, he'd failed, I think, 4 times, and of course, he was a doctor of CBT, and I said, "What? Why aren't you using the wonderful, techniques of CBT?" And he said, "Well, it's not working for me." So again, we ran the movie of doing the driving test. And once again, I suggested perhaps, I said the test will have to continue even if you crap yourself and pee yourself in the car. And this was in the summer, by the way. So it was going to get pretty hot in there. And said the stench is going to be unbearable. And I'm playing the part of the examiner. I'm sort of, I'm gagging and vomiting because I can see the flies buzzing around his crotch where he's obviously filled his pants with poo and he's peeing. And I said, he must continue with the test. He can't stop the test, and he's winding the window down, obviously, and he's going, get on with the 3-point turn. Don't worry about it. Just get on with it, And the guy was just laughing his head off. And again, I thought, gotcha. That's the pattern breaker that we want. And when he got in there, he said he'd never felt so relaxed because he's running that extreme movie in the back of his head again, in terms of what we talked about. And it's almost like brain surgery because something's happened in terms of the previous neural pathways have been severely disrupted. It's almost like I've literally dug the road up and all those old pathways have gone or they've been severely damaged. So his brain, of course, has to go down new pathways, and the new pathways are the extreme movie that we installed. So it's almost like downloading a new app that's going to work in that situation. You know.
Wonderful. So,
Yeah.
what about giving people a little bit of a demo? Would you be willing to
Certainly,
do that?
yeah. Well,
Yes.
what do you want to do? Do you want to do 5 minutes or 10 minutes? What would you like to do?
Um,
I'm offering you choice here, which I don't normally do. I'm
let's
offering
say
you
8 minutes.
8 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a bit of provocation there, doing 8 minutes. I've never done an 8 minute session. My goodness. Right, I'm going to take my watch off. Yeah. Okay. So we can do 8 minutes. Yeah. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I'm,
You're
I'm
gonna do the
just I'm
bubble.
just I'm just adjusting myself. Okay. So we're going to create this metaphorical bubble of possibility, and we'll do 8 minutes as requested. I'll keep an eye on the watch, so you don't have to worry about it now. Now in the bubble, I'm going to do anything and say anything to disrupt patterns, to break things up, to get your brain rewiring, firing and rewiring new neural pathways. So you actually think differently about the issue, the concern, or the problem, or what's going on. Yeah. In the bubble, anything goes. I'm going to do anything and say anything, but I really want you to succeed. I don't want the bronze medal. I don't want the silver medal. I want the gold medal round your neck after these 8 minutes, right? And then you can report back on this to the world that it was such a great success. It was unbelievable to have 8 minutes in the bubble. Yeah. And in the bubble, we will do, I have an underlying model that I'll discuss after the bubble session, which is the percussion, concussion, and then we have the discussion. And those three words come from the same root, which means to break things up. Okay, we want to be breaking patterns up. Okay, are you ready?
I am.
Yeah. So here we go. The bubble switched on. Would you like to start by telling me what is your middle name?
Daniel.
Daniel. Daniel in the lion's den. Was it Daniel who was in the lion's den?
I don't know. I don't
Daniel,
know the
it
lion's
might
name.
have been. We'll have to check that. We'll have to check that. Daniel's leaving tonight on a plane. You remember that song? Daniel's leaving tonight on a plane. I can see the tail light shining. Whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah. Daniel, my brother, I am older than you. What's the problem? What's the issue? What's the concern? What's shaking down? What's going on? What's it all about, Daniel?
Well, Phil, I've got kind of an addiction in buying books and online
Oh,
courses, and
yeah,
you
yeah.
too.
Welcome to the survivors group. I also have an addiction. If anybody's watching this, you can see, bookcases full of books. I was actually looking at a course this morning as well to think signing up for another course because I have an addictive personality, and it's all to do with dopamine, isn't it? You know what it is
Mhm.
all about, dopamine. Yeah. So what's wrong? So why would you want to get rid of this addiction? I'm a bit worried because I don't want to get rid of mine. We know we can all become members of the survivors group for this particular addiction. Let's get a group. Why would you want to get rid of this addiction? I could understand if it was, sex, drugs, rock and roll, pornography, bestiality. I could understand those types of addictions, but this is a good addiction. What's the problem? What's the concern with this?
Well, I mean, buying books is okay, but you don't get time to read them when you buy it.
Ah, you're
So
one of
I've
those, are you?
yeah.
You like, if you go into a lawyer's office, there's a wall full of books, and you say to those lawyers, "Have you read all those books?" And you know full well they haven't, because they just say. And some people, you can buy these walls of books, and they're not book wallpaper. They are proper books, but there's nothing in them. And when people walk in, they go, "Oh my God, this guy must be super intelligent. Look at all the books that he's read." Yeah, yeah. All right, with reference books, that's different. But most of the books behind me I've read. But then I'm older than you, so I'm an old addict. You know, I don't want you to stop doing this. I think you should.
Well,
How many books a week are you buying?
it differs, but when I buy books, I never buy one. I always buy three or four or
Oh
five.
God, yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah, yeah. I've got to. You want to come and live near me? There's a place called Hay on Wye, which is the town of books, and they have a big fest. Every shop there, or most of the shops there, are bookshops. It was set up like that many, many years ago by a
Mm.
guy called Richard Booth, who also bought the castle there as well. He was a Cambridge educated guy, and he wanted to turn it into a principality for books because this town is on the border of England and Wales. So what about starting one in the Netherlands? You know,
No, no,
don't just buy the books. Why don't you become the king, the new king of a new principality in the Netherlands, where all the shops are bookshops? Yeah, you can have the odd cake shop or whatever, so you can have a bit of cake when you're reading the books. Why don't you become the king of books?
no, no. I'm not.
Oh,
Don't
you,
want to
you,
go that
you've
way.
got the look of a king, I must say. You've got that look, that
Thank you.
regal look.
Thank you.
And
No, but Phil, I want to buy less because it's too much. I don't know where to stall them, and they frustrate me because
I
I see
know
them,
that. Yeah,
all
yeah,
those unread books, and I get a
yeah,
bit stressed.
yeah, yeah. Well, you could make furniture out of the books. The books that you've got, like, people do that. I walked in a bookshop recently, because I'm a future author as well, by the way. I'm future author.
You've been saying
Yeah.
that
Oh
for
yeah.
I
Oh
think
yeah.
20
Yeah. Yeah.
years now.
And there's not many people around who are. Lots of people. You know all these great people of whether it's Yap or Jeffrey, even yourself. They're all published. I think, oh, yeah, I'm not published. I'm a future author. You see what I mean?
You
Yeah.
keep people curious.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when's this book coming? We don't know, and that's the book that you want, isn't it?
It
You want the
is.
book
I'm
by Phil
waiting for
Jeremiah the
years.
Fourth. When's that one coming? You know
Yes,
what I mean? Yeah,
that's true.
yeah,
But
yeah.
and it's not just books. It's also online courses. There's a lot of money that goes there,
But
and
it's, yes, everybody's out there. These people who are, these are algorithms. They don't really, give a toss about you when they come on to our course, and and you learn this, and all the ideas. They're all can you see that there? Look, all the ideas are recycled. That's a potential cover for my book. Look.
it looks
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That was before I lost my hair, But all the ideas are recycled because they're hoping that mugs like you are going to come along and buy the course. And most of the book, let's be honest, most of the books are recycled, aren't they? They're old wine in new bottles.
Mm, yeah,
Yeah,
there's some
but then
truth in
they
there.
rely on people like you. We can press his buttons, beep,
Yes.
beep, beep, beep. We're in. Got his credit card details. He's signed up again. It's him again. He's back. This bloody idiot. He was on the last course. He doesn't realize that it's the same content on this course, but
It
we've just
really
shuffled a
feels.
few words around.
Sometimes it feels like that.
It
Like I'm
is.
a dumbass who fell for it again.
Yes, we've all been there. I'm a
Mm.
survivor myself. Yeah. And thinking, I've got to have more. I've got to have more. And you think, well, not really. What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the real problem? Is somebody
Hmm.
telling you not to buy these books? Was it your parents told you when I didn't have many books when I was a kid, you see, so I'm making up for lost time.
Me
Somebody
too.
told you can't have books?
Uh, well, my wife is used to it now, but
Oh God, yeah,
there has been.
yeah, don't mention
Yeah,
that. Yeah, let's not go there. You know, yeah. Did somebody else tell you not to buy books, Daniel?
I
You see,
myself,
I tell you what, you see, you know, for the viewers, tell the viewers what your first name is.
Sergio.
Sergio, yeah.
Mm.
He's the one that buys the books. Daniel doesn't.
Mm.
Daniel doesn't buy the books. Daniel, do you know people respond to people with more traditionally sounding names like Daniel? Daniel's biblical. You've got a biblical look about you,
Mm.
you know, of the shepherd looking after all your current books. You need to look after those books like the good shepherd. Now, Daniel doesn't buy books. So this is what you do. You get yourself a badge. You get a nice badge made. You can get these online, or there's even one with Daniel, right?
Mm.
Because people do respond to people with more traditionally sounding names
Mm.
as opposed to, sort of other names, weak names. I'm not suggesting your name is weak by any means,
Mm.
but Daniel does not buy books. And every time you get the urge for a course to, you go out later on, and go to a book. Where's the nearest bookshop to you?
In the center of Rotterdam.
Right? Center of Rotterdam, get in there, and you go in there, right? And you go, I am Daniel, and I do not buy books. Yeah.
This
I
might work.
feel the sun on my back, and I'm in Elysium, and I'm already dead. Yeah. Yeah. You do that, right? You're a gladiator. Daniel, I do not buy books. Daniel doesn't buy books. Daniel thinks books are okay for holding a door open, like a door stop, but they're not much use. And a lot of them are out of date anyway. By the time they've been published, they're out of date. Because then some bright spark algorithms come up with, we got some new information, we got some new information. he gets him, Sergio will buy this, Sergio will buy this, you know, he's gullible, he's vulnerable. And they go, no, it's Daniel. Oh, shit. Oh, Daniel. No, don't mess with Daniel. Daniel won't buy books. Daniel will not do online courses. Daniel will not do that. Daniel. Hmm?
This might actually work. I feel it.
Yeah. Well, you got to practice it. You need to get the badge. You need to
Yeah.
get into the zone. You
Yeah.
need to get, you know,
With Daniel.
Daniel's. That's an Elton John song, isn't it? Daniel's leaving tonight on a plane. Yeah, that's your song. You need a song with this as well.
And I
Yeah,
also think of the Karate Kid, Daniel's son.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that might
Yeah,
help. Yeah.
yeah.
I love the thinking.
Daniel doesn't buy books because it gives him pain. Yeah.
Wow.
Daniel doesn't buy books because it gives him pain. He doesn't buy books.
I'm going to buy a name badge.
Yeah, yeah, that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Ding, I think that's 8 minutes.
Wonderful.
Okay, so that was a little example. Very gentle session.
Yeah.
And as you probably, when you play this back, there was a fair bit of percussion in there, and I'm using that particular pattern. Research shows that was real research on people's names, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Real research shows
Yeah.
that people respond better to more traditionally sounding names. Like, you know, I haven't got a middle name, but of course I've got a title, Phil Jeremiah the Fourth. And of
Yeah.
course, Jeremiah, you know, prophet Old Testament, you know, a bit of authority there.
You don't need a middle
So,
name.
yeah, don't need a middle name. So there's some percussion going on there. And then sometimes there's a bit of confusion because, you know, because you're thinking about, well, what's going on here? Because you know a lot about provocative coaching patterns anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's up to me to throw a bit of a curveball in.
Mm-hmm.
And the Daniel thing got you going a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's a good name. I love
Yeah.
that. I think you should start using that a lot more. I am Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it feels tempting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and really for the first time in my life that I'm really considering that. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, definitely. Bit of singing going on in there, so that's a bit of a
Yeah.
pattern breaker.
Yeah.
And obviously not too shocking for you because you've seen me work before,
Mm-hmm.
and you know a lot about the provocative coaching patterns. But when you get somebody new and you start singing in the session, what the hell's going on here? You know, I've come to see this guy. He's got a good reputation. You know, I need some help here, and he's singing. And then he's suggesting that I wet myself on the London Underground. What's going on? Well, you know.
Yeah, I think it's a real nice demonstration, especially for people who are new, because it was
Yeah,
gentle and a lot happened.
yeah,
And I want to pinpoint something
yeah.
that I find also interesting. Do you know motivational interviewing?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
And what I learned there is that it's important to have the client speak change talk.
Yeah.
So to have the client advocate for the change.
Yes.
And find language for that
Yeah.
that advocates change.
That's right.
And I did that in this session.
That's right.
I said I wanted to buy less books and find time to read them, you know.
Yeah.
And I really felt some emotion behind it.
Yeah.
And that's change talk.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's congruence there as well, because I was being absolutely truthful. I have the same issue, which is quite, you know, which is quite a synchronicity. The books behind, there's books up in the attic. I go to this town of books. I'm thinking I can't buy any. Next thing I'm driving back with, you know, 10 books in the back of the car. So, but I love it. And I love the fact that I am a future author. In fact, I was down at the town of books with our good friend Yap Hollander, and he bought me he saw this badge that says future author.
Oh.
So I got the badge, so I'm wearing the badge now. So I think Yap was using it as some provocation, but it's backfired. I love the title of being a future author. You know, no critic's ever going to get me.
No, you're
Critics
gonna.
can't touch me because I'm a few. Even the critics are going, when's he going to write this book so we can have a go at him? For
Yeah,
God's sake, he's frustrating the hell out of us.
you can be a future author for the
Yeah,
rest of your life.
exactly. I had a friend of mine, Dr. Brian Kaplan, down in London,
Wow.
and he called me a selfish bastard. I said, what are you going on about, bro? He said, this book, The Humor Works. He said, you were walking around in your head enjoying it every night. He said, the rest of us want to have a walk around The Humor Works and see what's going on in there.
I think the book is gonna be there after you passed away because your relatives are gonna find notes and
Well,
and
well,
stuff and
there's
put together a book, right?
that's another problem. I'll have to have a session with notebooks. That's another one. I've got about 90 odd notebooks
Wow,
as well,
it's a big book.
So the waste books. Yeah,
It's,
all the stuff's in there, in the margins of my thinking. All this stuff's in there.
it might be
Yeah.
bigger than the Shakespeare book on the
Well, it
plane.
could be. Yeah, yeah, it could be. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking of employing some monkeys to type the book up for me because there was some research done. If you get enough monkeys, and this had to be done on a computer, and they continually type for hundreds of years, the monkeys randomly will produce the complete works of Shakespeare,
Incredible.
which is amazing, isn't it?
It
Yeah.
is. It is.
No, no. So yeah,
Wow.
so during that session, there's the percussion. So I'm bombarding with
Yeah.
with all sorts of crazy information. So I start off straight away. I didn't even ask you what the problem was. I said, "What's your middle name?" So that's a bit, that throws you a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
and play it. So there's that bombarding, that percussion, and then sometimes there's there's what we call concussion. So people are going inside and they're going into a kind of altered state to make sense of what I'm saying. So you see some people glaze over in the session, and when they're in that concussion phase, sometimes just stepping back and letting that happen as well, because there's a kind of conceptual blending going on there. So are you familiar with the term conceptual blending?
I am, but many listeners
Yeah.
don't. So tell
Okay.
us, please.
A good way to describe conceptual blending. So sometimes there's randomness, and there's a great story of a little lad who was suffering with his eyes, and he went blind, and he's sitting under a tree one day, and he's got this pine cone, spiky edges on it, and bits and bumps, and he's starting to feel this pine cone, and thought, wouldn't it be good if I could put these bumps and lumps into letters, and then people could feel the letters and read the book. And his name was Louis Braille.
Mhm.
And that's the true story of Braille. So
Wow.
sometimes people will conceptually blend the randomness I'm throwing at them and then link it to something new as well. And then that has a chance to grow in terms of literally developing, this wonderful neuroplasticity that we're all capable of as well. So we think you still think of the old issue, but you don't have it. You don't have that tension associated with it as well, or that certainly that limbic friction that might lead to extreme anxiety or even full-blown panic. You just don't get it. You think I'm looking at it, but it's not happening. Something has been uncoupled. So it's like the railway track. Somebody's pulled the lever, and I'm going down a different track now as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. And well, we see someone here who has more than 30 years experience in let only the provocative, let alone the other stuff. So how can people who are starting, who are maybe they already coach in a more congruent style, but how can they start a little bit with this playful
Yeah,
provocative way?
yeah. Obviously, it's good to have a basic introduction, and
Mm.
maybe you could, I train people in the UK and say, right, a weekend.
Mhm.
So it's a full-on weekend where I will obviously give them a bit of the history, talk about the bubble, and then give them a little notebook with all the different patterns in there that they can start to use. And then I'll say, right, when you go back to your practice, when you go back to your clients, talk to your clients about it and give them a little bit of blurb about what potentially is going to happen, and say, right, would you like to do 3 or 4 minutes in the bubble where we're going to switch on the bubble, and then we'll have a go at this issue, these stuck patterns in a different kind of way, you know. And lots of people do that and find it works very successfully as well, where they start small. But I do say to people as well, you've got to make yourself vulnerable as a provocative coach as well. You've got to
Mm.
be prepared
Mm.
to make yourself look like an idiot as well. You
Yeah.
you have got to, become the jester. You've got to dance around. You haven't got to be Mr. Serious, doctor of psychotherapy, and you've got to be prepared, because when you're doing that, you are taking yourself into different departments in your brain, you know. And I also find, I say to people, they say, well, how do you, keep your muscle toned? I
Mhm.
said, I'm reading all the time around provocation, around neuroscience. Neuroscience has never been better, in terms of, all the stuff that's coming through. And I'm finding now I'm making more connections with what goes on. I remember doing this years ago, and I'm talking to Frank Farrelly about it, about the neuroscience. Even the neuroscience 25 years ago it was hardly there, was it?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
we were still debating whether we could grow new brain cells. Well,
Mm.
we now know we can.
Yes.
Um, you know, um, but I remember talking to him, and Frank wasn't interested in it. He said, "I know it works." So I suppose it's, the Greeks knew about atoms, didn't they?
Mm.
Even though they didn't have a hadron collider, but they just knew that it worked. But I also like to look at the neuroscience behind it, so I can use that as an explanation as well, especially if I'm working with psychologists, or I'm teaching mental health staff. I want to explain what's going on as best as I can in terms of the updated research that we've got on the brain as well, because you can really connect those patterns. Joseph Ledoux, who's a fantastic neuroscience scientist, talks about how the brain can reconsolidate. So when you do something like that mini bubble session we've just did, your brain now is reconsolidating all the way down to the level of protein synthesis. So there's change going on at the molecular level. And then you begin to notice that the next time you come across, when you go to buy some books, you will notice a difference. You
I,
will.
I
Trust me,
can,
you
yeah,
will.
well,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe so. Yes.
Especially if you're Daniel, you'll notice the
Yes. If I have
difference.
the badge.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because that's a new persona. And we see this, you've heard me talk before about different personas.
Yes.
When actors play sad roles,
Mhm.
they're in a play for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And they've done research on this, that, there's a dip in immune functioning, serotonin drops, and the mood goes down. They're only acting. When actors play happy roles for weeks and weeks and weeks, it's the reverse. There's a boost in immune functioning, serotonin is elevated, the mood goes up, they're only acting. We're going to ask ourselves, well, what roles are we playing on a daily basis? And I think using provocative coaching type work is a fantastic way to break patterns, and you do it with love and care, because you really want the best for that person. And I really believe that. And I know I'm only as good as my last session, but I really want that person to change. I want to assist them in every which way. I'm prepared to rip my guts open in front of them and say, I want this for you. Please change. Yeah.
And it's feelable.
Yeah. And
I
it's
could feel it.
true. It's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
It's
I
true.
believe you.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow. Um, Wonderful, Phil. You have so much wonderful stories and so much wisdom, and so many things connecting to the provocative way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you remember this, don't you?
I would I,
The
I would
the the the
love to
whistle. Shall I
finish
tell?
with the whistle.
Shall I
Can
tell
we?
the whistle
Yes,
story
please,
very
please,
briefly?
please tell us about the
Th-
whistle.
This was my dad's whistle, and he used to. My dad was a bit of a disruptive contrarian, So he would go up behind people when he was down at his local pub or his club, and he would blow the whistle really loud, and they would jump and tip their beer and go, "For God's sake, put that whistle away, take it off him," you know. So when my dad passed away, I got the whistle. And we come near the funeral, and my sister gave me a stern warning. She said, "I know you got dad's whistle." She said, don't blow that at the funeral." I said, "Well, dad would have wanted it, wouldn't it?" She said, "No, Philip, no, please don't blow that whistle at the funeral, you know." So I'm at the funeral. I got the whistle in my pocket, obviously. We're in the church, and Dad's song is playing. "Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling." Everybody's crying. I'm crying. There's another part in there going, "What about the whistle? What about the whistle? Blow the whistle after the song." And I'm going, "No, that's not right." All this ambivalence, this ping-ponging back and forth in my brain. So we get out, and I thought, shall I blow the whistle as they put in the coffin onto the hearse? And people are still sad and upset. Perhaps they need the whistle to lift this, but no, can't blow the whistle now. Got to the graveyard, which is on the side of a hill down in Wales, and they put in the coffin down into the earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, shall I blow it? And I thought, it's not right, And spontaneously, a cousin of mine who I hadn't seen for 25 years comes up to me, and he didn't say, "I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your dad." First words out of his mouth were, he said, "That old whistle your dad had, what happened to it?" And I went, "Do you mean this one?" Blew the whistle, and there was great applause around the around the grave. The vicar said, "Oh, it's great to have people blowing whistles at funerals," and even my sister said, "Oh, she said that was lovely with the way you blew that whistle." And I thought, do you know what? That's like provocative coaching. It's about the timing.
Mm.
You've got to get the timing just right. When you get that timing right, it's the difference between a light bulb where the photons are not in phase and a laser beam that can cut through steel. So the timing is important as well. Thank
What
you for
a,
listening to that story.
yeah, thank you so much for telling it again. I was hoping you would tell it, so I was also thinking let's keep it at the end, and it's a
Yeah,
wonderful way to finish this conversation with you, Phil. I enjoyed it a lot. I truly
good.
believe you helped me with my book addiction.
Well, ping me
Oh,
and let me know how you're getting on,
I will.
Daniel.
I
Well,
will.
let Daniel ping me. Yeah, Daniel.
Yes.
I'm only
Yes.
speaking to Daniel these days now. Yeah,
All right.
Daniel.
Better. Better.
Okay,
I'm gonna change my name. So don't leave, please. But I'm gonna finish the recording, and then we can have a little chat afterwards. People, I hope you enjoyed it. I can't imagine you didn't. Where can people find you? That's important.
You can, they can email me at philjeremiah1 at outlook.com. So I'm happy to converse on emails. People can ring me as well, on the on my mobile if they want to have a chat about anything. Available to do training. I tend to get invited to do training, so I will go and work for a business or a company, and I'm quite flexible as well in terms of what they want or what they want me to deliver as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. So you don't have a website, but people
No,
can
I
email
did have a
you.
website,
You
but
did have.
I think the Chinese hacked it, so
Oh,
I had to take it down. And I'm
oh.
assuming yeah. So yeah, I had to take it down. So I haven't put the website back up, but you
If
can
it
just contact me direct.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if
Yeah.
if your website comes up again, I can put it in the show notes so we can cover that.
Yeah, if it comes up again, we don't know, do we? It's a bit like the book, So there
Well,
may be a website,
a
there may
future
not be a
website.
web. We don't know yet. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you
There
so
is a
much.
future website coming.
Yes, exactly. Wonderful.